Well, hi, everybody. Brendan Gulick with you, and welcome to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on, frankly, a somber Sunday. This is not the reaction that the Ohio State Buckeyes were hoping to have today. A frustrating and, as Ryan Day said, sobering day here in Columbus. I think they were holding on to some outside hopes that perhaps the Buckeyes might be one of the 4 teams selected for the college football playoff, as unlikely as that maybe seemed going into the day today. But as it turns out, Ohio State was left on the outside looking in. They are the number 7 ranked team in the country in the final CFP poll. And so they really weren't part of the conversation for one of those top 4 spots. And it goes to losing, not just losing to Michigan, but frankly, in my opinion, losing at the wrong time of year. I don't like that that's part of the deal here, but it seems pretty clear cut that losing at the wrong time of the year is pretty impactful. And so Ohio State will play in the Cotton Bowl on Friday, December 29th. They're going to play the Missouri Tigers, who have had a very good season. And Ohio State, I think, will probably have a pretty competitive game against Missouri because the Tigers are going to come in wanting to beat the Buckeyes. That would be a win that would be a resounding victory for their program. Who the heck knows who's going to play in that game for Ohio State? We will find out all those answers along the way. But Ryan Day talked to the media today for the first time since losing to Michigan now 8 days ago. And he touched on a wide variety of topics. And we'll get into some of those here. I'm trying to give you the impression of what it's like around here. And while there are a number of my fellow media members on both sides, we're all kind of spread out in the indoor field talking with you now. It's pretty quiet. And it feels, metaphorically like the dark clouds that we see outside right now in central Ohio. Not a great day. Pretty darn disappointing for the Buckeyes because of the way this thing all shook out. And I asked Ryan Day a couple of questions that were not so much about Ohio State, but more college football central. I asked him point blank, hey, you are a coach that preaches winning at all costs. Just win. Figure it out. You just got to win. It doesn't matter if it's an offensive blowout like we've seen the last few years. Doesn't matter if it's incredible defensive efforts like we've seen a lot here this year. Winning at all costs matters. And I wanted to know how it sat with him that a 13-0 team that plays in a Power 5 conference that won at all costs without their star quarterback did not get in the playoff. How did that sit with him? And he really didn't want to get into the specifics around the decision. He's trying to stay focused on Ohio State, and I get all that. But he alluded to the fact that he didn't think it was right that a undefeated Power 5 conference team did not make the college football playoff. He thinks that should get you in the playoff. I think he's right. I think it's completely ridiculous if Florida State was left out. Don't care what other people think right now about Alabama being better than Florida State. They very well might be right now. I think Florida State got hosed beyond a measure of a doubt. And I get the impression that doesn't sit well with Ohio State fans either, because while they didn't take care of their business against Michigan, and so ultimately they can only look themselves in the mirror, knowing that winning at all costs isn't actually always enough to get you in is not okay. And there are some problems with college football and the way things are changing. Might address some of those. I think it's a good thing that we're going to an expanded playoff. I've said 100 times recently that for 10 years I have felt it's really dumb to have a 4-team playoff when you had 5 Power 5 conferences. And obviously things have changed. That's going to go away a little bit now with the expansion. But, there are a lot of questions about this sport at large that people are asking themselves today. Here's a great example. The committee says that Liberty, in a game that nobody at the top of college football is going to care about, right? Liberty's playing Oregon because Liberty apparently was dominant in their schedule and undefeated compared to SMU, even though Liberty had the lowest strength of schedule in the entire country. There are so many contradictions with these final CFP rankings that have left people really, really upset today. And while Ohio State certainly isn't blaming anybody for their lack of inclusion in the playoff, I guarantee you there are some people within this building that are pretty ticked off by what they saw today in those rankings. So I guess we'll just leave that part at that. I did also ask Ryan Day a question that I think a lot of people want to know the answer to around scheduling good competition outside of the league. They've played at least one high-quality team the last several years outside of league play. Obviously, Notre Dame was the big non-conference, win this year, and for so long, that was bolstering Ohio State's resume, right? That's why they were number 2 going into the last week of the regular season, because they beat Notre Dame on the road, and they beat Penn State, and they were undefeated. Huge reason for why they were number 2. I asked Ryan Day, hey, with the changes coming, are you still in favor of scheduling Texas, Georgia, Alabama like they are on your future schedule? Obviously, Oregon is now a conference team, but Oregon had been on the future schedule as well. And Ryan unequivocally said, yes, you have to play those teams outside of league play. You measure yourself against the best teams in the country, and you learn about how good you are or are not based on how you play in those games. And he made it pretty clear he wants to continue to schedule that caliber of team. So if you're an Ohio State fan looking to see what this schedule might look like moving forward, sounds pretty clear to me like Ohio State is going to continue to make it a priority to play those teams, and that they wouldn't necessarily look to back out of contracts, at least at this stage of the game, with some of those other big teams. I think that's really interesting because there are a lot of people that disagree with that. I'm glad to see Ryan Day takes that stance. But there are a lot of people saying, well, gee, what good does it do to go play, teams that could beat you when now there are even more, spots available to you? With this 12-team playoff, he was asked basically, hey, what do you think about the idea of playing a conference championship? Is it even relevant anymore? Should you not play one because you could hurt yourself if you lose at the wrong time moving forward? Ohio State's got they've got sort of the blessing here of being able to recruit to a place with the fans and the tradition and all the resources that are available here. It would be an enormous shame to even think about Ohio State not being a top 12 program in the country, right? That would be pretty hard to fathom. So they should probably feel pretty good about making the playoff every year here moving forward. But Ryan Day didn't want to go much into that. He was pretty focused on saying, look, we didn't win last week, and we needed to win, and it's been a pretty tough week around here. I admire the fact that he's taking a lot of ownership of that. There were so many people here this last week that were, hey, does this guy even get it? He's lost 3 in a row. Does he even understand how important this game is in the state of Ohio? It's pretty clear Ryan Day unquestionably knows what losing to Michigan is all about, and why that is problematic and why that's not the standard around here. I think it really bothered him that at 11-1, they weren't even talked about as one of the top 4 teams in the country on the national, selection show today. You never even saw Ohio State's graphic on the screen. It was never even a conversation on whether or not they should be in the top 4 based on the details that we were shown publicly. They didn't even bring a reporter here nationally to cover that. I think that's kind of crazy, because if you look at what actually happened today with Florida State, if Georgia beat Alabama, then the top 4 were Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Texas, because they were the next best team in. So Florida State was never getting in the playoff at all, regardless of how they played yesterday, even with Alabama beating Georgia, because the reversal would have also kept them out. And so, a tough day around here, realizing that a 1-score loss on the road where you had the ball at the end of the game, you were driving, and you threw a game-sealing interception, that ended your season, essentially. And you could kind of feel the weight of that around here this afternoon. Not a lot of fun right now in Columbus. In terms of turning their attention forward, they're going to play a Missouri Tigers team that's been pretty good this year. And who knows what the team's going to look like when they actually, get off the plane, and, which guys are going to play and which ones aren't. It's a wild time in college football right now. And in the middle of that press conference, news comes out on social media from Evan Pryor that he's entering the transfer portal. I'm sure that didn't catch Ryan off guard. I'm sure he had that conversation ahead of time. He certainly didn't react as though he didn't know that was going to happen. But considering the transfer portal is not technically even open until tomorrow, how many of these guys are already leaving schools and then committing to new programs just continues to show that it's the Wild West, and the rules are in so many ways not relevant. And it's terrible what's happened in a lot of ways to this sport and what we're turning this into. I hope there are better forces at play where we can make some progress on getting things back to what we know and love about college football. But I'm concerned that there are too many things that are too far off the tracks in that regard. So personally, I don't think it's a shock if Marvin Harrison doesn't play in the Cotton Bowl. We don't know for sure. He's one of a number of guys that I think realistically could opt out. Now, I've also heard recently that maybe it's not a 100% guarantee that Marvin bolts for the NFL. He's obviously one of the best players in the country, and he would unquestionably be one of the first picks in the NFL draft, maybe even the top pick. The NIL era has changed things so drastically that I don't think you can rule out any possibility. Maybe Marvin decides he wants to stay. Maybe he gets an NIL deal that is so valuable to him, and his goals are still, part of the most important fabric of who he is that he wants to accomplish at Ohio State. Maybe he wants to stay. I guess we're going to find out. He's got some thoughts and conversations he needs to work his way through. But this does have a feel, similar to the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, where Ohio State's like, hey, we had a great year, and ultimately just wasn't quite enough at the end to get in the college football playoff itself. And so you're using this bowl game to both conclude this year and in some ways already start trying to make an impression for the following year. What young guys are going to pop up and make big plays down at Jerry's World in Dallas. The game is on Friday, December 29th. It's one of the first couple of the New Year's Six bowl games. I think there are a lot of fans that are feeling like, meh, what do we care? We're playing Missouri, and it's not a college football playoff game, and we've created this scenario now where if you're not in the playoff, then whatever game you're playing is irrelevant. And there are a lot of fans that feel that way, and I get that. But there's going to be a lot of interesting things to watch from this team leading up to that game and in that game, because you are looking at the future. And there are going to be a lot of young guys that are going to work hard during practices the next couple of weeks here to try to make impressions that they should get legitimate playing time and be a big part of this thing moving forward. Ryan was asked a ton of questions about Michigan and about quarterback play. And I think the best way to sum it all up is that he was very non-committal when asked about who was going to play quarterback, whether they were looking for a quarterback in the transfer portal. Should Kyle just be the starting quarterback and that's that? And Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz, would they play? Would they not play? He was extremely non-committal in answering all those questions. And frankly, I don't blame him. It's the reality probably set in for him that the Buckeyes were not going to make the college football playoff when they saw Alabama beat Georgia on Saturday night. I would guess that's probably when Ryan Day could realistically say, I don't know if we're going to get in this thing. So maybe at that point you start thinking forward. But prior to that, I think you're still holding out hope that things could have fallen your way. So I don't know that they've had nearly enough of those thoughts and conversations around what they're going to do in that bowl game. But when Ryan was asked to evaluate Kyle McCord this year, he said, and I quote, I think he's a good quarterback. I do. He acknowledged where he started, how he got better, how he progressed throughout the course of the season. And, ultimately, was it good enough or was it not good enough? They need to figure that out. He said, when you lose the last game of the year and you're 11-1 and you don't make the playoff, you evaluate everything. What wasn't quite good enough to keep you out? And quarterback is part of that evaluation. But he's going to evaluate the coaching staff. He's going to evaluate offensive line. He's going to evaluate the defense. He's also dealing with the fact right now that Jim Knowles interviewed for the head coaching job at Duke. I know Ryan would prefer to keep Jim Knowles here. He made the comment, Jim is really happy at Ohio State, but recognizes that it's part of the business, that it's the time of year where guys could get plucked off your staff. And maybe he decides he needs to make staff changes on his own accord. He said he'll evaluate that. Perhaps there's reason for him to make some of those moves before a bowl game, because then you could start to see what some of that looks like before you actually, get into spring practice and start working toward next year. So, Yeah, there's an awful lot to be determined with this Ohio State program right now, and I would say the body isn't even cold yet. That's probably the best way to put it. It's a sad day. It's a somber day. The Buckeyes are not happy right now, and the stinging loss from Ann Arbor a week ago is still very much present. I am very interested to see how Ryan Day wants this thing to go forward the next couple of weeks. What guys is he going to give opportunities to? How does he coach Kyle McCord through some pretty tough adversity right now? Ryan was asked about, the mental health initiatives that he's been so omnipresent with here, during his time. And Kyle McCord's probably gotten a heck of a lot of vitriol on social media and national pundits and every corner of America saying that Ohio State's quarterback play wasn't quite good enough here. And Ryan reiterated in the press conference today, he knows he's loved around here, and you try to build somebody up as best you can and prepare them for when things like that happen, to try their best to ignore the outside noise. Kyle's a tough kid, and I think he's, able to handle some of that criticism that's come his way. And I look, I've said it all along. I didn't think quarterback play was the problem for the Buckeyes this year. But we can debate that another time. I thought he played well enough to win. I don't know. Certainly disappointing that Ohio State is at this point of the year and not in the college football playoff. I think the thing that most disappoints me is the fact that the college football playoff selection committee seems to have a different set of criteria all the time. And it's just these moving goalposts, right? I'm not saying Ohio State should have been in the playoff this year unequivocally. I think this is obviously the first time in 10 years that you've had 8 teams that all had an argument. And some of those arguments were a little more obvious than others. Really doesn't sit well with me that an undefeated Power 5 conference team was left out. And then, by the way, the justification makes no sense to me that if you take Florida State out of the playoff because you deem them not quite good enough with their current quarterback situation, why are they ranked ahead of Georgia? Why are they ranked ahead of Ohio State? You tell me right now, if I think I saw the opening line was like a 12-point line already between Georgia and Florida State. If Florida State's that bad, quote unquote, that bad, why are they ranked ahead of Georgia in the poll? Why are they ranked ahead of Ohio State in the I said poll in the rankings, the CFP rankings? Right now, Ohio State and Florida State, if they played each other, you want to tell me that Florida State would be a favorite? Because that's kind of what that is insinuating to me. And I don't get it. You're either rewarding teams for winning games or you're not. I think winning is supposed to matter. And it sounds like it matters to a degree, but it's not the be all end all. And I just don't think that's right. So that will continue to be the debate for a long, long time. And the reality is we will have, even though everybody says we won't, we will have debates on who's going to get in the playoff and who isn't next year. And maybe it's not right at the top like it has been 4 versus 5. It'll be 12 versus 13. We are still going to have debates on who should get in and who shouldn't. Those debates are still going to include high-quality teams who have good resumes that are deserving of opportunities to play in the postseason. The good news is teams that are unquestionably good enough to win a national championship will no longer be excluded. And it's a shame that for the last 9 years, we've had that potential. And yes, it really feels like this is the first time where that's been a huge problem. We got lucky that we didn't have to deal with that for too long. But there's no doubt in my mind that if Ohio State was in the college football playoff, they could absolutely be competitive against any team in the country. And it's a real shame that losing at a certain time of year matters more than losing in general. It doesn't feel like Ohio State has quite the same value placed on their high quality wins over Notre Dame and Penn State and the way they played at Michigan than what the committee probably should have given it. So it is what it is. And the Buckeyes will unfortunately lick their wounds here for a little bit, and then they'll try to get to work. The team is going to travel on the 23rd of December There will be some downtime between with this sort of being time for finals and the end of the semester, and it not being the playoff. There will be a little bit of downtime for the team where they won't practice quite as hard for a little bit. Then they will hit the road on the 23rd. They will get to Dallas. There will be no media availability for us on Christmas Eve or on Christmas Day. I believe on the 26th is when they're going to start having opportunities to talk to coordinators and some players. All leading up to, I believe it's an 8 o'clock Eastern time kickoff on Friday, December 29th between the Buckeyes and the Missouri Tigers. And by the way, Ryan Day was very complimentary of Coach Drinkowitz and said, we were two young coaches that have kind of had some parallel paths, crossed with each other once in a while and have gotten to know each other a little bit, and was complimentary of the way Missouri plays and the challenge that's going to be presented to them. So you never take a chance for granted, and I know Ohio State's going to do everything they can to try to win that game when they get down to Dallas here in a few weeks. All right, that's probably the best summation I can give you from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center today. Not fun, not a great day, and Ohio State, I think, is going to try to wipe the slate clean as best it can and figure out a way to make the best of the situation that they've got, and be grateful for the fact that at least moving forward now they don't have to worry about a 14 playoff at this point. But plenty of questions to be answered along the way as to who's going to play in that game. We've got all the latest news and info on the team for you at BuckeyesNow.com, and we will continue to bring you all that information as we get it. Certainly with transfer portals, becoming a huge part of college football and officially opening on Monday. We'll follow that information for you. National Signing Day is coming up here in a couple of weeks. There's a ton of news coming down the pipe, I'm sure, on that front, and we'll cover that for you as well. All right, enjoy your Sunday. Ohio State heading to Dallas to play in the Cotton Bowl, where maybe they can channel some good vibes after having won a couple of games down there, both against TCU in a non-bowl setting in that stadium, but then also obviously having beaten USC a few years ago in the Cotton Bowl. I'm Brendan Gulick. Have a good rest of your weekend. Thanks for joining us here in Columbus. We'll see you real soon. BuckeyesNow.com.